Alright, you true crime junkies, this one's for you. A new HBO documentary series focused on a case behind the popular true crime podcast Serial has just aired its first episode, and people have plenty of thoughts. It's crazy to think about, but true crime shows, podcasts, or books haven't always been as popular as they are now. When the This American Life podcast Serial debuted in October 2014, true crime was a guilty pleasure you only shared with your close friends and loved ones. Serial changed it all. About a year after its debut, episodes of the incredibly popular podcast had been downloaded more than 80 million times. The podcast centered on the 1999 murder of Hae Min Lee, an 18-year-old student at Woodlawn High School in Baltimore, and the questionable circumstances surrounding the investigation into and murder conviction of her ex-boyfriend, Adnan Syed. While most listeners would have just let the case go, director Amy Berg couldn't let it go. The Academy Award-nominated documentary filmmaker spent more than 3 years documenting Syed's fight for a new trial, as well as digging beyond even Serial's reporting into Lee's murder. And now, we've got the 4-part HBO documentary series, The Case Against Adnan Syed, which aired its first episode on March 10th. Director Amy Berg admits that while the genre is thrilling for her because of the investigative work, it's the way in which she believes films like The Case Against Adnan Syed can expose the flaws in our criminal justice system that continues to energize her work. When asked by Esquire magazine if she had more to unpack from the case, she said that reading Hae's journal really moved her. And then after talking to some of her friends, she felt like there was a reason to put this into a film series just to understand the cultural context and to see people's faces. There was also a post-conviction hearing a few months after she started the project, so there was definitely more information to get out of the case. In a Vulture TV review written by Angelica Jade Bastien, criticism is given to the podcast saying that 18-year-old Hae Min Lee, whose murder is the reason the podcast even exists, remained out of focus in Sarah Kenning's investigation, as did the racial politics in the Baltimore area where the crime took place, and that the HBO docuseries does a better job with the failures of Serial and true crime itself. It brings Hae Min Lee to the forefront in archival footage and spends more time on her. Amy Berg weaves together diary entries, phone conversations with Syed, and recollections from their loved ones, although Lee's family declined to comment, that definitely add depth to this case. According to the Vulture review, Amy Berg creates not only a portrait of Hae Min Lee, but of the people, city, and cultural intersections that shaped both her life and afterlife. The docuseries has a large cast of people, each providing emotional and personal truths they carry due to the devastation of this case. Amy Berg revealed to Esquire she went into Adnan's mom's daycare center, Adnan's friend Rabia's house, met with Adnan's friends and Hae's family and friends. She felt like the pain was still there. It was still so real, so it was challenging for her to really jump into the case. What's really different too is just how much Adnan and Hae's ethnicities and cultural backgrounds had an effect on the case. Amy revealed that when she first interviewed Baltimore detective Daryl Massey, they did lots of research into what was going on in 1999 in the streets and crime. She was fascinated by some stories that are loosely in the film about Korean convenience shop owners and violence against them on the street, which was mostly perpetrated by African Americans. Amy said it was kind of like a street war. She continued by saying, "I remember asking Detective Massey just how difficult it was when there was a crime that they were trying to investigate with a Korean family. And he looked at me and said, it's very difficult because there's a language barrier." That statement really hit Amy. It made her realize that there were probably things that Hae's family didn't understand the police needed to ask. Hae had a pager, and yet there were no pager records anywhere in the case file. She had a pager. Everyone talked about it. They all used to page each other. Little things like that could have painted a much more thorough picture and might have just been missed based on a language barrier. It's a pretty big deal. Here are the major details you should know before watching the docuseries. Hae Min Lee was killed in 1999 after disappearing. Her body was found a month later in Leacock Park. She was a popular student and an athlete and was well liked. Adnan Syed, a fellow senior at the high school in Baltimore, Maryland, was convicted. He was her ex-boyfriend. In 2014, the podcast Serial brought this case back and questioned Adnan's guilt. After the podcast, director Amy Berg felt compelled to do some digging of her own and get a different point of view. The Case Against Adnan Syed picks up where Serial left off. The 4-part documentary series premiered on HBO on March 10th, and the following episodes will air on March 17th, 24th, and 31st. Director Amy Berg shared with Esquire that because things sometimes go on hold and there's a lot of overlap, I know this is not the end of the story for us, because Adnan is still in prison and he still doesn't have a new trial. So I want to turn it over to you guys now. Were you one of the millions of people who listen to the Serial podcast? Will you be watching the HBO docuseries? And from what you know, do you think Adnan is guilty? Let us know all your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks so much for watching The Trendy, where we cover the latest in celebrity and pop culture news. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm Amy at Amy Cassandra MTZ on all socials, and I will see you guys next time.